Is sufficiently that can granulate and give rise to problems. So superiorly this distance should be approximately 1. The incision granulate length should be just around 5.5 or 5.5 centimeter or 5 millimeter, and subsequently you curve it down to the midpoint. Now if you see here, you can see the middle terminate here, you can see the frontal process, and you have the inferior terminate down there. So roughly to this level of the midpoint would be more than enough for you to expose. And then you make a horizontal incision from this point on to join this. So are you clear about these incisions? The first incision, the second incision, and now we connect. So usually I use a blade to perform this. Now here I am using a single knife, okay, and connect these incisions. Is that clear? Now once that is done, you can use a. So generally, what I prefer in these situations would be a micro ear instruments. You can use a round knife, the flat knife. These are excellent instruments to aid this flat. Or you can complete those incisions. These are pretty good, provided the instruments are sharp. Okay. So this is where our lower cut is. Okay. So join into this incision here. And now what we have done is we have got a posteriorly based flap. Is that clear? Yes? Now you push it down. So usually in live surgery at this particular point you have bleeding. So you use patties and so patties applying at this bleeding will settle down. Now you elevate it and push it and reflect it backwards. Okay. So ideally you are not touching the unseen. You have to see the free edge of this bone here. Can you appreciate that? Yes? Okay. So beyond that would be the unseen. Subsequently, the next step would be to engage your punch. The common mistake is to keep the punch fully open, engage it, and then engage the tip of the punch and take a bite. You see this opening of the punch, it will bite to the mucosa. Can you see that? Yes? This is a common mistake, and all these areas will start bleeding. So, when you introduce the punch, keep it half open. Can you see that? Just the tip, engage, rotate, and then open sufficiently enough to engage the bone. Understood? So that will be your first bite. Okay? Once you take the first bite, ideally you should get a glimpse of the sac. You will see now in this particular specimen, if you have seen all these preserved specimens, the entire soft tissue has got shrunk. Now once the first bite is taken out, subsequently the second bites, you make your instrument slightly more vertical. Can you appreciate that? The first bite was more or less like this. You engage and get your first bite. The subsequent bites will, in fact, I prefer a smaller keresan for this step because this is a big one.
Vivek,
Yes.
can you show that suture line between the lateral bone?
Okay.
I think I'm seeing it.
See now, this is actually the demarcation that we are talking about. Now, this is not something that I generally rely on. It is not something that is evident all the time. Okay. So, if you see what we are actually removing here is part of the frontal process of the maxillary system and the lacrimal, part of the lacrimal bone. So,
That is the suture line.
yes, can you see that here? Okay, yeah. So, what we do is you engage it. Now, practically, this yes, for anatomical orientation, it is nice. Can someone just hold the head? Can this come here and hold the head? Yeah. So the mucosa starts peeling away. Okay. At this point, once you take the lower bite, you make your punch vertical Now I usually use thinner punches here, so I will be able to take a bite and usually our fracture the thick segment of bone. But here the punch is fairly large, so I think I have to punch to the sole bone rather than trying to outfracture it. As I mentioned in DCR, the key point is to and the thickness of this bone basically varies. So here we have a very thick bone. So the key point in DCR is adequate bone report. So you really cannot compromise on this bone report. So again, the principles of engaging the punch, try not to each other surrounding. So this is what I was talking about. If I have a smaller punch, so can you see the suture line? So I can just gently engage and rotate this bone. Can you see that?
Yeah.
It separates a lot the suture line. So this is what Sir was talking about. Now, so you have to have different sizes of punches. So as you go up, you will have to engage the smaller punches because you will not have too much of space as you go up. And this is a technique that I generally use. So with a gentle twist, you can move that bone out. Okay. And that actually exposes the sac. Can you see that? Yes? Now here, because we have already done an unsnake, you are not seeing the unsnake on that side. Otherwise, on the other side, you would be seeing the unsnake. So what Anand sir had done is he's preserved this mucosa over the unsnake, which you can actually appreciate on the other side. This is part of the mucosa over the unsnake blood, so it was preserved. Because in the routine PCR, there is no indication to remove an unsnake off for that matter to perform on. There is a flap there.
Stage put your difficult to the abdomen fossa in the orbit. You show that the movement of the abdomen.
Yeah. So we have got the large set of bone out. Now otherwise you will have to remove it in bits and pieces, so which takes so much time. At this point, if you see, you can palpate the medial canthal region and you can appreciate the movement of the sac. Now however, this is not sufficient. We have just removed the most important aspect. As I told you, as you come lower down, what we are dealing is with the sac. So the most common mistake is someone sees this movement here and makes an opening here and you land in the failure. Because most of the times the obstruction is in the nasolateral duct region. So the whole idea is to go as high as possible. Okay. Now all this bone superiorly has to be drained. Now if I am able to engage my, so usually apart from the strain cases, you also have to have curve cases.